Welcome to the Emisarios Unidos de Luz channel. If you enjoy this near-death experience story, consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. Now let's start with the story. I grew up in a very devout Christian family, so as a teenager, when I decided to drink and take drugs, it was an act of rebellion against my family and upbringing. What began as the cliched experimentation with party drugs gradually evolved into full-blown addiction to hard drugs like heroin and later to methadone and other opioids. One morning, after taking multiple doses of methadone and consuming several shots of vodka, I entered my bedroom to encounter an angelic entity waiting for me. Instantly, I knew my time was up, and the angel of death had arrived to escort me to the place of my destiny. Terrified, I immediately began praying to Jesus for forgiveness, knowing that the place I was destined for would not be one of sublime illumination, having prioritized the world of shadows for as long as I had been given stewardship over my life. Jesus, please forgive me, I prayed, but as I prayed, I could feel my body traveling at high speed through a tunnel. As I traveled through the tunnel under the angel's charge, I noticed people chained to its sides, screaming in agony and begging us for help. I noticed that even though I passed them by at an incredible speed, I was still able to know everything about them. Then, suddenly, our tunnel journey ended and my journey through hell began. As my eyes darted in every direction, I saw people of various nationalities from different epochs and eras throughout history, and as I passed them by, I was able to read their thoughts and even enter their minds to experience the eternal torment that they were experiencing, the eternal torment in a place where time seemed to have slowed down considerably. The angel of death suddenly yanked me and pushed me towards what looked like a beautiful pearl-white subterranean castle, and as we approached the majestic and intricately crafted structure, he shoved me towards its exquisitely etched, immense doors. The doors opened automatically, revealing a beautiful, cathedral-like, brightly lit antechamber lined with prison cells on each side. In those cells, I saw all kinds of people, but it was conveyed to me that this part of the castle was a section of hell where false leaders and false prophets were imprisoned as punishment for willfully misleading others during their lives, turning the attention of their followers away from Jesus, God, and salvation, so that they themselves would be elevated and worshipped instead. Because those false leaders selfishly desired to be kings of the castle during their lives, even at the cost of others' happiness, the castle became the prison they had enslaved themselves to. While the angel forcefully urged me down the hallway, I was gripped by terror and a sense of foreboding, wondering as to the manner of torture I would be forced to endure for all eternity. As I looked left and right at the prisoners in the doorless cells, I saw all kinds of people, but none truly caught my attention until I noticed one man dressed in the typical fashion of 19th century United States. As I turned my attention towards him, I immediately began to see through his eyes all that he saw, to know what he was thinking, and to feel everything that he felt in his entranced state. I'm home, he thought, testing the grass beneath his feet as an uncanny sensation of déjà vu washed over him. As he scanned the pastoral panorama before him, he turned his attention to a two-story house, a dwelling so plain yet characteristic of the provincial habitations of that period in American history. As he began walking quickly towards the house, I became aware of a commotion coming from the upper story, and I sensed that whatever was causing the ruckus was something utterly sinister in nature. As I listened intently, I could hear a growling sound accompanied by words of frustration spoken in a strange language before I was suddenly propelled towards the outside wall of the house's top story by an unseen force. Instead of colliding with the wall, however, I passed through it and into the upper floor, where I came face to face with two hunched, alligator-faced demonic creatures whose hideous faces were as repulsive as they were evil-looking, ghastly entities that drooled as they spoke in their strange tongue. Though I couldn't understand their words, I knew they were frustrated by their failure to draw the attention of the man whose home it was, and in their exasperation, they deliberated on how to coax him to enter and meet them upstairs. As the man standing outside approached the front door with great trepidation, his instincts warned him that something was off, that perhaps he wasn't truly home, that perhaps he was still in hell. One of the demons, upon noticing my presence, turned its attention to me, looked me in the eye with its soulless gaze, and asked me telepathically to call the man outside to come upstairs. "I'm not helping you," I responded telepathically, and as I denied him my assistance, the demon turned back to the other to ponder upon and discuss further how they were going to achieve their objective. The demons then began to cry for help in an appalling, noisy, demonic glossolalia, and it was due to their horrendous clamor that a black object suddenly passed through the wall. The object, a spinning vortex, created a bottomless pit as it whirled before abruptly transforming into a 12-foot angel. Although that being of stately magnificence emanated masculine energy, its face was as delicately featured as that of a beautiful, alluring woman, despite the characteristically demonic aspect of its mien. The angel, shimmering with a variety of shades of gold, then proceeded to give instructions to the two demons, who passed through the walls of the house as they hurried to carry out the task assigned to them. It was then that the golden angel began beckoning the man outside with the most sublimely beautiful and enchanting music, which, although rendered vocally, sounded like a blend of its voice and a unique woodwind instrument. As I watched the scene intently, I was fascinated yet terrified, for unlike the man outside, who was utterly immersed in his hallucination, I was very much aware that I was in hell. As the angel lured the man with its beautiful music, I heard the door burst open and the man who was outside bound upstairs to prostrate himself in front of the angel in deference and reverence. Enthralled as I watched the events unfold before me, it was communicated to me that this wasn't the first time he had heard that music, the beguiling incantation that had become his succor. Although the angel spoke sweetly to him, feigning delight at being in his presence once again, its true intent was to foment his perpetual anguish and despair in the hell he had wrought for himself. After assisting the man to his feet, the angel waved his arm, transforming the scene before them into a panorama overlooking an endless sea of people from their position on an elevated podium. The golden angel then proceeded to walk the guy to the edge of the podium, instructing him to preach the message displayed on the 6 Egyptian hieroglyphs that suddenly appeared as the angel raised his arms. As the man, now the preacher, began to elucidate the message embodied by the symbols, I could sense how seeing himself as one who had attracted the unwavering attention of the crowd gathered to hear him speak, and even in hearing himself orate to the engrossed crowd, served to ennoble his sense of importance, to the degree where he became consumed by the illusion of his own grandeur. Through his craft of spellbinding articulation, the focus of worship of the multitude was subversively transferred to him rather than the God that he referenced in his discourse, and as such, the deceptive stratagem of the golden angel was fully realized not only in the man's self-deception but also in the leading astray of the flock. As I sensed how gratifying it was for him that others regarded his words as gospel, I watched as each of the hieroglyphs, while suspended in the air, illuminated in succession as he translated them from right to left, with a new set of symbols replacing the previous set once their interpretation was complete. As the preacher performed his task, I watched as the most devilish grin spread across the face of the golden angel to reveal razor-sharp teeth dripping saliva flecked with gold. As the angel unmasked its nefarious nature, I began to hear the distant outcry of profanities as someone in the crowd criticized and condemned the preacher. The denouncements grew increasingly louder as others began to join in, until the entire congregation was accusing and damning the preacher, arguing that it was because they followed his words that they were condemned to eternal damnation. They asked him as to the impetus that gave him the audacity to preach the same lie that he preached to them while they were alive. "Do you honestly think we're going to fall for your deception again? Come down from the pulpit if you dare," they taunted him. Oppressed by the weight of their taunts and jibes, the preacher's self-assured demeanor faded as he realized he wasn't, in fact, standing before a crowd preaching. Beaten down by the din of their curses, his eyes widened with fear as they goaded him to descend from the pulpit to receive a well-deserved beating. Amidst the choir of their babel, the ground began to shake violently, and the congregation then began to part, clearing a pathway for the alligator-headed demons, who, having completed their mission, came forward with the preacher's children in hand. "Why did you lie to us, Daddy?" the preacher's daughter asked as she held her teddy bear. Overwhelmed with despair, sadness, and regret, it dawned on the preacher that he was actually in hell, that his family was also in hell, and that they would remain there for eternity. As I heaved and convulsed in my attunement with the preacher's emotions, I suddenly found myself back on the lawn where the hallucination had begun, watching once more as he examined the grass with his foot to see if it was real. As I considered the implications of the eternal torture the preacher was condemned to endure, I awoke from the immersive experience to find myself in the hallway of the castle, staring at the man who had once been a preacher. It was then that the angel of death began to shove me down the hall, towards a dark, craggy region of hell outside the castle. Realizing that we were edging towards the section of hell where I would spend all eternity, I began to dig my heels in as panic set in. From afar, I noticed a very bright light approaching, and I knew in my heart that it was the light of Jesus, who had come to rescue me. Jesus descended from above, grabbed hold of me, and as he carried me away from that infernal realm, I felt like a child as he held me close. Everything suddenly brightened, and the next thing I knew, I was back in my house, lying on the floor, reeling from all I had just experienced. For a while afterwards, I sat shaking in my lounge chair, slowly regaining my composure from the shock and disbelief. What I experienced during my NDE felt more real than the sense of reality we associate with our everyday waking state, yet I acknowledge that, as the listener, you would need to experience it firsthand to truly understand and accept that my NDE was indeed real. In recounting my experience, it is quite traumatic to relive, and the only thing I stand to gain from retelling it is a sense of peace knowing that I am fulfilling my duty by warning people about hell while also letting them know that Jesus and salvation are real. At times, it feels as though the forces of darkness are trying to stop me from sharing it, Yet I am driven to spread the good news about Jesus and salvation through him because it was Jesus himself who saved both my soul and my life. As an epilogue to the story, I would like to share what was revealed to me when I shared my NDE with a relative. Years later, after I shared my experience with them, that relative came back to me with photos of the house I entered in experiencing the preacher's hallucination. "That's the house. That's the house of the preacher," I exclaimed in amazement. He then showed me another photo, and within it, I saw children dressed in the clothes of the same period as the preachers. "That's them. Those are his kids," I declared, recognizing the faces of the preacher's children. Then he showed me yet another photo, and I recognized it as a picture of the preacher himself, Joseph Smith, the founder of the Mormons, or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Now, I know that most of you may not believe my story, but let me tell you that having experienced an affinity with his mind during my sojourn in hell, I know Joseph Smith better than anyone, even better than his own mother. In those 4 hours, I experienced a oneness with his thoughts and feelings, and it was through such an intimate association that I came to know his deepest fears and darkest desires. I had and have no interest in the Mormons, and if given a choice, I would have picked anyone other than Joseph Smith to be so intimately acquainted with. After showing me the photos, that relative explained who Joseph Smith was, recounting the story told to the world of how he was visited by an angel who revealed the location of the gold tablets inscribed with hieroglyphs. Even years after my NDE, I would go to bed with the anxiety that I might die in my sleep and end up in hell, but after 15 years I have come to accept that I have nothing to fear as Jesus' love is unconditional, a love that I will never be able to truly grasp.